Life doesn't always go according to plan. Sometimes it breaks you. After a training accident left me paralysed from the neck down, I had to rebuild my body, my mind and my life. I'm Ryan Curtis, and every episode we dig into the chaos that shapes who we become. Before we get into the episode, it'd mean the absolute world to us if you could follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're currently listening to this on. For you guys, it's just a small click of the button, but for us, it's huge to grow the podcast, to get bigger guests on and have more interesting conversations for you. Thanks so much and enjoy the episode. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Made in Chaos with me, Ryan Curtis. On today's episode, we have Dec Pierce. Most people know Dec as the voice behind Block Rockin Beats, the radio host, the DJ, the man who brings people back to the nights that they'll never forget. But behind all that energy, the last few years for Dec have been the kind of few years that would shake anyone. A brain hemorrhage, a cancer diagnosis, 2 moments where life suddenly stopped feeling guaranteed. And that's what makes this conversation so powerful, because this isn't just about music. It's about fear, survival, fatherhood, identity, men's health, and what really matters when life reminds you how fragile it is. Dec, before radio and presenting was ever a thing, what were you like growing up?
I was a very quiet kid. In primary school, very shy.
Sorry, Dec. Fucking hell, lad. Yeah.
What, is there something coming up?
No. I just realised the timer because it helps me figure out where.
Oh, yeah.
Went
to try to drop.
Sorry, yeah.
All right.
Apologies for interrupting you. I just actually noticed in the corner.
I'm still rolling here anyway.
Right, lovely.
Can you see that, yeah?
Yeah.
Lovely.
So, Dec, what were you like growing up before radio and presenting was ever a thing?
I was a very quiet kid. Really quiet kid. Very shy. And definitely wasn't the loudest person in the room. I was a very quiet kid, and I think that's part of why I kind of fell in love with music. I remember in primary school, I've spoken about it before. I was bullied in primary school. I was a very tall kid. I suppose I was a very tall, very shy kind of kid, and I think that made me sort of an easy target sometimes for people who were inclined to bully. I remember music became like an alter ego for me. Like as a kid, even as young as sort of 7 or 8, I remember seeing the joy that music used to give people, like my grandparents and my parents. You know what I mean? You go home from school and you'd be sticking on a record and you'd see how happy it made people. So I think
it's a serious observation for like somebody who's like 7 or 8.
Yeah, it was. I remember in school, I really enjoyed school. I loved it, and you know, I'd loads of pals and all that sort of stuff. But I remember if I ever had a tough day in school, I'd go back to the house and stick on music, and it was kind of like it was like an alter ego. You know what I mean? If you had a tough day, and I used to love listening to the radio, but I used to love music, and it was ever present in the house. My dad's a fantastic musician, and we used to always have sing songs in the house. You know what I mean? There'd be always a guitar.
To play intro, okay.
Exactly. And my granddad as well had an amazing collection of records. So yeah, I was a very quiet kid, and I think when I eventually got into DJing, I suppose the quiet kid sort of who used music as a sort of an escape. Kind of eventually then wanted to. I knew that music was always going to be a part of my life from a very early age, and that's probably
like what age would you have been?
Honestly, when I was 7, 8, 9.
Right.
You know, I used to when I came home from school, I had a ghetto blaster, and I remember I used to. There's actual tapes of me doing my own pretend radio shows where I'd either have some music from a record that my granddad had, or I'd use the radio, say if it was 2FM or whatever that was on RT, and I'd be talking and I'd be doing a pretend radio show and flicking then between that and the music. And yeah, it became like a an alter ego, and you know, sort of like an extension to my personality and an outlet for me after if there was a tough day in school.
Yeah.
That music became this sort of escape for me at a very, very young age, and I knew that, you know, from a young age, from around about 8, 9, 10, that I wanted to work in music, and I became fascinated with doing radio shows. And then when I was doing kind of gigs at a young age as a teenager, I was always more comfortable behind the decks or on stage and entertaining the crowd because I was at the parties, but I was sort of like the guy that was putting it together.
And it was DJing in particular that you kind of remember liking?
Initially it was the whole idea of doing a radio show. So to do a radio show and to host it was a dream of mine from a very, very early age, and I was obsessed with it. I was obsessed with putting together a radio show and, you know, presenting music and to see the joy that music gave people, and then that sort of led into the you know, the gigs and all that sort of stuff as well. But I used to always say that looking back on it, it was like an alter ego, basically. It was like, you know, Clark Kent when he takes off his glasses and he puts on the Superman, you know, cloak or whatever, and he's then a completely different person. So I used to find that music just gave me this sort of, became like an extension to my personality, and I was probably, looking back on it, a massive amount of sort of music therapy, like an escape. Yeah. So if I had,
sounds like music gave you a lot emotionally as well.
Oh, it did completely. Yeah, it was. It did. It again. I used to see the joy that it gave people, like my grandparents, you know, or my mum and dad, and I became sort of hooked on that. It became like music became like a kind of a drug. So, I instantly just said to myself that I wanted to host a radio show. I was always fascinated with radio and that sort of the ability to play tunes and let people hear them, and then with the gigs as well, it was I was always more comfortable up on stage behind the decks, in control of the party, and again seeing how happy music made people, and it like music therapy is a real thing. So I think that really helped me as a kid develop a personality and go from the guy that was quiet and shy and bullied in school to kind of becoming a more sort of confident, outgoing person.
And you said, like you would say, it kind of probably let you be more yourself when you were.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. I think it became a release and an escape.
Nice.
So for me, being in the radio station studio, like when I eventually got into pirate radio, was just this completely different person, and I think it still exists to this day. I think, you know, I'm probably at a party, I'm probably the quietest guy in the room, and the live shows are again like backstage before you see me going on. Even now to do a show, I'd be very quiet, kind of keeping to myself, and sometimes that brings, because if you're waiting too long, it can bring doubt, and you kind of go, can I actually do this? And then you go on stage and you click and you switch into a whole different kind of character.
Yeah.
So music became a really important part.
And where did you start off DJing initially? Like what radio station was it initially?
It was a radio station called Coast FM, which eventually became there was Coast FM. It was a pirate. It was based in a garden shed in Ballybrack. It eventually went on to become a station called Phantom FM, which got a full legal license. But I remember.
Now, for anybody listening that doesn't know what a pirate radio station is, explain it.
It's basically an illegal broadcast. You're broadcasting without a license, so it was completely illegal. So there was always a chance when you're doing a show that someone could raid the studio and, you know, shut the whole broadcast down and confiscate all your gear. And for some reason, again, being that quiet, reserved kid, there was like this rebellious streak that pirate radio gave me. And I used to love the whole sort of idea that I'd be going in and doing this illegal broadcast, how different to my normal life is this? Do you know what I mean? So it became, I was always obsessed with it. I remember when I was trying to get, because there was no social media, there was no way for you to kind of showcase your talent. Do you know what I mean? You kind of, you could only sort of push and work your way into these places. So I remember, I think I was 15, and I kind of did a bit of research, and I found out that this station, Coast, was just up the road from us at the time in Ballybrack. And I remember one time we were, again, bearing in
And how
mind,
would you finding that out? Was that just word of mouth that you?
just from being a bit of a geek and
Right.
listening to the radio the whole time and listening out for certain different things that some of the DJs might have said about where they were based or whatever.
Right, okay.
And I remember one time I was, again, bear in mind, I was quite shy kid. You know, we had a house party. My dad threw a barbecue in the house, and I was about 15, and he gave me a can of beer, and I had a sup of the beer, and before I knew it, I had this sort of confidence after a couple of sips of beer, and I went into the room off the kitchen, and I phoned up, and I asked the guy to answer the phone if I could pop over and have a look at the studio, and would he consider giving me a show. So I literally got Dutch courage, and got the courage to make a phone call, and then I went over, and I don't know how he gave me a radio show. He did eventually give me a show. It was a Wednesday night dance music show, and the first one was from his bedroom in Ballybrack, and that's where it all started. And from that point on, I became hooked on it. Brought in my bag of records and CDs, and then eventually ended up moving on to another station that was a massive pirate radio station in Dublin in the 90s called Pulse FM. And that was a big dance music station. And that's where I spent most of my youth, sort of from around 16 to maybe 18 or whatever, until it eventually got closed down in 1999. But they were the best years. But there was something about the illegal aspect of pirate radio that just made it so appealing. So I used to love doing that, and I'd be doing it during school. So
it was people's job to try and come and shut them down, wasn't it?
that's it. They'd be raided.
Would I be wrong in saying there was way more prominent over in London than it was here, though?
No, there was definitely a big pirate radio scene in London and in the UK, and that's where the rave scene sort of, grew in strength, because you'd have pirate radio DJs in the UK talking about a rave that was going to be happening in a warehouse in the middle of a field somewhere. So that was the UK scene, but there was a big pirate radio scene in Ireland. I can only talk about Dublin, but and the dance music pirates were massive as well. So, but it was kind of at that time, pirate radio was really important. One, again, because there was no social media, but also because a lot of the mainstream radio stations were just playing rock and pop. So, you turn on to one of the sort of the mainstream legal stations, and they'd be playing Bon Jovi, U2, Sinead O'Connor, REM, all that kind of stuff. And there was no outlet for people like myself who became obsessed with dance music apart from pirate radio stations. So you'd be listening to a pirate radio station. There was like stations like Sunset, and I used to listen to them as a kid. I have my ear glued up, and that's where you found out about all the tracks that were coming out, the ones that you wanted to go and pick up a copy of in Abbey Discs. And it was like this sort of like underground community. And again, there was no outlet for dance music.
Like everybody kind of would have known each other in it.
Yeah,
I'd
absolutely.
say it was quite small then anyway, would it have been?
Oh, it was small, but to be honest with you, when Pulse FM eventually closed down, it was competing with some of the mains that you'd never have known. But there was we did sort of like independent research about who was listening, and Pulse became this massive, radio station for the youth audience from 15 to 19-year-olds. But we used to run gigs, and so that's where we met everyone. But it was a wild time. It was a really wild time. But again, that whole part of my life definitely stemmed from a quiet kid who saw that music made people happy and became hooked on that. And then music became like a form of music therapy, you know what I mean, for me. But they were some of the best days of my life. You'd be going into the radio stations, you'd bring in a 6-pack of beer, cracking open a beer on air. And
how did you used to make money off it back then?
You didn't. I mean, the guys that ran the station, and Pulse was run really professionally. They used to take a couple of ads from maybe a clothes shop, you know what I mean, in town, that was selling jeans or whatever, or a record store. But they used to also do gigs. So they would do gigs in the Temple Theatre. We did one in a place called Deep Nightclub, which was in the Slorgan Park Hotel as well. and they'd make money from that. So they'd run a gig. There'd be 1,000 kids in there paying whatever at the door, and that kind of kept the station going because there was expenses, you know.
Yeah, of
and
course.
They were run quite professionally. Like they were run with proper structures and all that kind of stuff. Albeit, you know, you could bring in a 6-pack of beer and be cracking. And I sometimes miss those days where you'd be
Just
bringing in a
enjoy
can
yourself,
and you'd be cracking it open on air and that. But it was brilliant, and it was quite contrast to sort of I suppose what I was doing sometimes in my daily life in school and things like that. So I used to live for the weekend when I go over and do it, because I was in school and I went through school and I went through college and all that kind of stuff. But I went and I used to be doing those shows sort of at the weekend or late at night or whatever. They were the best days of my life, and sometimes I missed them, to be honest with you.
And why do you think dance music and nostalgia connect with people on such a deep level? Like, because the dance music saying, like, I remember even thinking, like, when what you were saying, I remember them times when I was only young.
Yeah.
And you could only get dance music on I think it was Pulse. And it was the only one, but it just seems like it just connects a lot of people. Obviously, I've even been to your gigs.
I think you've kind of nearly said it there, even in with what you're saying there, that you're talking about music there, and straight away you're remembering a particular time in your life, and I think that's what it is. I think music and radio has this connection with the audience that TV sometimes doesn't have. I mean, if you think about it, you know, when's the last time you got goosebumps watching something on telly? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you're driving along in the car or you're out for a walk or whatever, and someone puts on a track, a DJ plays a song, and you'd forgotten about it, and it brings back an emotion.
Yeah.
So I think I often say that I couldn't tell you what I did yesterday, but I could tell you what I did in 1995 during the summer, and I could nearly tell you, you know, what the weather was like the first time I did a pirate radio show. I think music brings this unbelievable hidden emotion out in people, where they can remember a time in their life where there might be an emotion or, you know, an amazing memory, or they lost someone, and a song can trigger that. I get
that too.
But I get that constantly at gigs, about how, and that's kind of how the success of Block Rockin Beats actually happened, was that connection with the audience. And people kind of call me over, especially during lockdown and things like that, where music and radio became a really, really important part of people's lives. And I get people calling me over and going, like, you've no idea how much Block Rockin Beats saved me during lockdown. But music is like if you hear Born Slippy, you know, it brings you right back. That intro to Born Slippy, it brings you back, and I'm really getting even goosebumps thinking about it. And it can just bring back.
Yeah, it is so funny the way you're even saying that, because when you think of certain songs, like I'd have songs that probably not necessarily heard them, it would bring me back to the first time I heard them, but you know, if you're getting played over and over, and I remember being with certain people at certain things, and
it instantly. I think songs. I still have it myself when I'm playing certain songs on the radio show. I can nearly tell you. I could tell you nearly what day it was that I heard "No Good Start to Dance" by The Prodigy for the first time, and just how blown away by it I was. And that's the impact that music has. It gets into your brain, and it sticks there and it lives there, and you might not think about it until you hear a particular song again, and then straight away it can remind you of pals that you had when you were growing up, your parents when they were younger, your grandparents who might not be with you anymore, and it can bring back a whole range of emotions. But it also allows people to escape and to go into. I think if I find it at gigs as well, and even in my own life, if you're having a tough time, and you know, life is dealing you a hard card, sometimes music and going to concerts and things like that, it's a bit like football. It's kind of, it's an escape. You go and you become this different person for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and you're not worried about your mortgage. You're not worried about, you know, the bills you have to pay, or whatever sicknesses, or, you know, or people who are unwell in your family. It's a complete escape. And I think that's why music can be a little bit like a drug, to be honest with you. And that is definitely something that has continued throughout my life. And I became hooked on music at a very early age, and I've been blessed that it has been able to be part of my life even up to now.
Must be so nice though, people coming over and saying things like that to you, you know what I mean? Because I know you probably wouldn't think about like, oh sure, I'm just playing songs and whatever, but for a lot of people, like you were saying, that's
it's deep. And again, that with Block Rockin Beats and the radio station on Today FM, during those lockdown days where I remember going into the radio station and people couldn't leave their houses, I had a pass to get into the studio, and people developed this kind of thing where they were doing kitchen raves, bedroom raves, and all that kind of stuff. They were actually buying gear. They were buying smoke machines and speakers and lights, and they were setting up this kind of stuff. And it kept people sane. So I remember going in, and if I was kicking off the show on a Friday night at 7:00, I knew that there was, and I used to do it, and I used to think about, because it was such a close bond, and there still is with the audience, I used to think about Mary, who is in Clare, and she's on her own, and her neighbours aren't close or whatever, and this is a huge part of the week for her because she's had a tough time, and she wants to escape for a couple of hours. And I used to find that there was nearly like a pressure on me going in to do that, because I knew that people were at that time were listening to the show so much. And I get it now.
You feel that during COVID, like?
Yeah, it was. It was that's kind of, I think that's where the success of Block Rockin Beats kind of started, because there were people who were having a really tough time, or they'd lost a family member. I when it eventually lifted and we went back and we started doing gigs, again after the shows, I'd always jump off into the crowd afterwards and chat to people, get a few photographs and all that kind of stuff. And you get people calling you over going, you've no idea how much Block Rockin Beats meant to me during lockdown. Right. And this is all because of music, if you know what I mean. It's really weird. And they'd be like, I lost my job. I lost a family member. I still get it. I get letters from people who tune into the show, and they're talking about family members who committed suicide or whatever during those days. And then they would talk about, but you played this song on this particular day and it allowed me to escape. And, and then sometimes when they're at the gigs now, I play a song and people come to me afterwards go, I can't believe you played that song. It reminded me of my sister who passed away. And when you played it, I felt like there was a connection and I started crying. And I'm going, wow, this guy who is a dance DJ just playing tunes is suddenly getting this sort of connection with people, like a proper emotional connection where people are writing you letters and they're telling these really personal stories, and it's all linked through music. And when you think about that, it's just it's mind blowing, and it's such a privilege and such an honor to have that connection, and I take it really seriously. And so if people reach out to me, whether it be through social media or through a letter or through an email, I will always, once I see it, I'll always reply, because it means an awful lot to people, and those connections that have been developed with me through music are big, and it is extraordinary. Sometimes even when I'm telling people stories about that, like yourself, I kind of go, that is just incredible, insane that this bond and these emotions have all happened because of
but like you're saying,
because of dance music,
the way it just brings you back when you do hear a certain song, and then I suppose like there's more to it that's even attached than just the song or music. It's like it brings back a flood of memories going, oh, that reminds me of, like, I have certain songs that like I kind of remind me of relatives who've passed away, and it's like every time I hear the song, I'm like, it almost brings me back to the times that I was with them.
That's 100% true. I think it can bring back amazing memories like we've spoken about, and then there are times when it just triggers an emotion, and that emotion becomes uncontrollable. And it's happened to me on numerous occasions. My daughter will see me, if I'm out for a drive and we have Spotify on shuffle or whatever, there's one particular song and there's one particular memory, and I might as well tell you the story. And it's I cannot listen to Robbie Williams' Angels because it was my grandmother's favourite song.
Right.
And she was obsessed with that song. She loved it. she used to think I sang a great version of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I used to sing that for her at parties.
Yeah. It's I have that A Rainy Night in Soho. That was my mother's song. So every
Yeah.
time I heard of that, I'm the same. Like, you know, it's
Jesus, Curta, you made me cry.
sorry.
There we go. But
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just, and that happens to me with certain songs where and again, that's it. Straight away, I was just instantly thinking of my grandmother, who was a huge part of my life. And that song, you know, I just can't listen to it. So if it comes on and I'm in the car and I'm trying to be strong for Ava, I'll just
Yeah, just
switch
next
straight away, and I'll put on some dance music that reminds me of raving when I was younger. You know, snap out of a deck. You can't go there. But isn't that extraordinary when you think about it? That a song
can
can
just trigger all that, yeah.
something. And music therapy is a real thing. I've had friends of mine who are music therapists, and it's used for a wide range of treatments for people. So yeah, it's an incredible thing. I'm so blessed to be still working in music. I can't believe I've spoofed my way to 47, and I'm still making a living out of music. But it's brilliant, and I wouldn't have changed. And there was times in my life where I didn't think I was going to be able to keep going with it, and that. But I've been blessed to keep that.
What's it like?
music
Because I've been at some of your gigs. Like, what's it like? Because the atmosphere is absolutely electric. But what's it like for you to be standing up there, like in front of thousands? Just
it's unbelievable.
What's that feel like?
It's unbelievable, and it used to take me a while to get used to it again, because when you do a show, you are on like the biggest natural high of your life. You go out and you're doing a gig, and it's just 2 hours of pure adrenaline. And sometimes with that, you could do a gig, because our shows, I think, are a little bit different to most shows, because we don't do an awful lot of shows, but when we do them massive. And that was something that I wanted to create. I wanted to kind of have sort of 4 or 5 huge shows every year where we have 5,000 or 6,000 people, you know, or 8,000 or whatever it was in Fairview. But it allows me to build a stage show, you know, with production. I never wanted to do that in small. I wanted to do it massive.
Yeah,
And so when you're doing a show of that size, it allows you a budget to build, and that's what we do. I invest back into the show to build this massive stage with production that would match international acts like The Prodigy. That was always the goal. So when the shows happen, they become like this. It's nearly like, you know, a Dubs day out, like a proper football day out, where people kind of use it as an excuse to get together. And they make a day of it. So, you know, when we did Fairview Park, which you were at, people are meeting up from lunchtime, and they're having a few pints in the pub or whatever the case is, you know, bag of cans in the park, and they're going then. And Fairview Park, for example, became this thing where it was a show that people had to be at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a surreal feeling when you see people and you're coming to the gig, you know, and you're coming in backstage, and you're going along in the car, and you're going in. I'm going in with Kate and Ava, and you're seeing people streaming towards somewhere like Fairview Park, and you're going, that's all because of this mad thing that I've created, you know. But doing the shows is incredible. It's can be quiet backstage, and that's the way.
Do you get nervous backstage?
I don't get nervous anymore. I don't get nervous about anything really anymore. Ever since all that's happened to me over the last couple of years, I just enjoy the moment. And the hardest part about doing a show is trying to live in the moment, and to try and remember that this is happening, and to try and sort of soak it up.
Just to take it in for yourself.
Yeah, because sometimes it feels like you wake up in the morning, you have a shower, suddenly you're on stage, and suddenly you're over. It's over, and you're backstage, or you're in a pub having a pint afterwards going, did that really happen?
Yeah.
But the energy on those shows, it's 2 hours of just pure adrenaline, and you're getting that vibe from the crowd, because the crowd have made.
Amazing.
I think with Block Rockin Beats, the the age profile is a certain thing whereby people just make a big night of it and they get the babysitters in and, you know, they're out and they're out for it. There's no holding back. Like it's not like you're sitting there and you're playing to, you know, a bunch of, you know, quiet people for a half an hour. When you walk out, they're screaming at you and you can't help but just get completely absorbed in that. But
that's nice what you said about just doing your best to take it in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I used to think about that and fighting as well. Like I'd be like backstage shitting because I'm going out to have a fight in front of thousands of people.
Fighting for you, must have been the same.
But I remember thinking like, I know there's a lot of kind of weird feelings here, like nervousness, anxious, you know, but I used to say to myself, take this in because one day this is gone you're never getting this back.
But you probably found that, you know, people watching the fight, you know, for them it went on for a half an hour or whatever it was, but for you it probably felt like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You're just you walk on stage, you're completely absorbed by the crowd, the buzz, the atmosphere, and then it'll be over before you know it. And
I don't know about like in DJing in of something of that magnitude, but I know in fights, like when you go out and fight in front of that amount of people, you almost go on to autopilot.
Completely.
Is that right?
Often I come off stage and I wonder, how did I do that?
Yeah,
or I see a video and it's like imposter syndrome. Be like, that's not me. Did I actually do that?
Yeah.
And you know, because
I wondered that, is it the same feeling?
Completely.
You know,
you have a doubt. You have a doubt in your mind. You're going, and sometimes the last thing that be on your mind when you're walking out, if you're having that sort of doubt, is where's the play button? Where's the is the mixer set up properly? And it's like, because if you get any of those things wrong, the whole night is ruined. So, you know, those kind of things can play on your mind. But I think I've learned to sort of deal with it. And what I try and do now, and I was definitely guilty of rushing it away when I was younger. I think now,
in terms of just being nervous and just wanting
it to be over, because
so like that in your first couple of fights as well. You're just like, just get me out of here.
Just get this fight over with.
Yeah.
You know, and I used to be like that with gigs. I'm like, oh God, you know, you'd be nervous. But now I'm trying my best to live in the moment. And sometimes during the show, you're getting carried away and you're interacting with the crowd or you're doing whatever. I do a lot of interaction and a lot of kind of pushing up to the crowd and stuff. But sometimes I just try and stop and look around because, as you said, someday it will be over.
Yeah.
And someday it'll be a memory in a photograph or a video, or I'll be telling my grandkids or whatever the case is, please God.
Amazing.
And you will, I know through the fact that I'm getting older and I know how life works now, that eventually it will be a thing of the past and I'll be looking back on it. And I suppose, you know, I want to be able to say to myself that I did stop, I did slow down, and I did look at the crowd and appreciate it. And I suppose that's even when there's a show like Fairview Park where Ava is at it, my little daughter, she's 9, and you know, to try and see it through her eyes, and it's a really special feeling when you've got family there. For the homecoming gigs like the ones in Dublin. It's an amazing feeling. But again, you're trying to just take it all in and to have the chats with them backstage and to live in the moment. But it's a serious buzz. And sometimes when you have that buzz and you're doing a show, and this took me ages to manage, the endorphins and the high is like, it's like the biggest drug you could possibly ever take, you know. And it, you know, the next day or the days after, sometimes because it's such a high, you get this overwhelming low.
It's a dump,
to try and manage that, and poor Kate, my wife, knows that now. So the next day, so say Fairview Park was on, the next day after that, I'll be still on a high. You know, there'll be people send me messages and I'll be looking through photographs and I'll be distracted. And then it's the next day after that when the endorphins have left your body and you can feel the bruises and you're nearly searching for that next high. So I'm often on to my manager going, God, I can't wait for the gig now in Limerick. You know what I mean? And the band are the same because you've it's properly addictive. It's an amazing feeling.
And back then, did you ever think Block Rockin Beats was going to be what it is today?
Absolutely not, because it was I started Block Rockin Beats probably at my lowest point in terms of of radio and music, I had actually made a decision.
How did it come about that you just started it?
I had this idea. I know this sounds mad, but I had this idea in my head since I was about 16 or 17.
No way.
I was always obsessed with the idea of a live dance music show that was that had live musical instruments with it as well, but that wasn't the orchestrated thing, that it was more like rock. And it was very much influenced by The Prodigy. I suppose The Prodigy, when they were doing stuff, when they released like Firestarter and Breathe, it was always a real energetic kind of show.
A side note, them videos used to scare the life
Oh,
out of me when I was a kid.
didn't they? Yeah, it was so different at the time.
It was just, they were intense.
But they've stood the test of time. They sound as fresh now as the day.
But I just remember
released.
seeing the videos on MTV and all, like,
Yeah.
oh, fuck, like,
Oh,
they
it
were
was
scary.
so fucking different at the time as well. It was really different. But I was always obsessed. So I had this idea in my head about the live show. But for the radio show, that probably started at my lowest point. And I'd actually decided that I was going to leave music and leave radio. I was in another place and I wasn't happy. I knew I was kind of like a super sub, and I was never going to be sort of listened to and taken seriously. So I actually decided to walk away from that. I had this idea in my head, and I met a beautiful lady called Adele, who was the head of Today FM at the time. And I met her, and I said, look, just meet me for a coffee. I met her and I gave her this idea of a dance music show that was quite nostalgic, that didn't take itself too seriously, that played all the big dance tracks. Sometimes I used to find that over the years, from watching other people doing it and for doing it myself as well, that sometimes when you're DJing, you can get so immersed in DJing that you nearly forget what it is for the audience.
Yeah.
So, it was all about playing that rare mix or this underground track or whatever the case is. And I remember going, I think now at this point, I just want to play big dance tracks that strike a memory with people that wouldn't have been played actually on mainstream radio back in the day. But now, be given this opportunity to do a dance music show on a nationwide commercial station.
So you essentially wanted to do a modern Pulse FM, in a sense.
100%.
Yeah.
And it was taking all those values that I knew were important for me when I was a teenager, and bringing it to a platform when I'm in my 30s and 40s, and the audience have grown up with me, and what do they want to hear? And I just made a decision. I said, look, if you give me an opportunity, I will prove my worth. And they ended up giving me a chance. It took a long time. There was a lot of rejection. There was a lot of, I'll call you again another time. It was months that went by, months that felt like years. Eventually I got a call and I'm like, look, we think we have an opportunity for you. And that opportunity was at midnight on a Friday night until 2:00 in the morning. And I got an opportunity.
Midnight until 2?
Midnight on Friday night until 2:00 in the morning, Saturday morning. And I said to them, look, if you give me that slot and let me prove it, I said, I'll do it for free. And that's something I haven't actually spoken to people about. I actually said to them initially, I said, just let me do it for free. And I did it for free for about 6 months or 7 months. And I just wanted to, again, I had reached the stage, I think it was just after Ava was born.
Right.
And when Ava was born, I don't know, it just gave me this incentive and this courage and belief in myself that I actually hadn't got for my whole life. And I stopped. I think I used to put an awful lot of roadblocks in the way of my life and my development, personally and professionally,
And
because I was afraid of failure.
Right.
And I was afraid of failure. I was afraid of things not working. I was afraid of people laughing at me, people thinking that, who the fuck does he think he is type thing.
Yeah.
And when Ava was born, I just stopped caring about that shit because, like,
What do you think that is? Like when your kids are born, like, do you think
I
it's
just think it's different for everyone. I can only speak for myself, but I suppose it just gave me a value, a kind of self-worth or something, and it was like all the bullshit, all the crap, all the roadblocks that were in the way they were just gone, and they seemed sort of irrelevant and a bit stupid because I had this screaming toddler and she was like, feed me. I was like, okay. So it was like, yeah, I know, and he was just like, holy shit, this is a human and I have to mind this human. I was like, what was I worried about my hair for before? What was it? This is like, all right, okay. So at that point, you know, this screaming toddler looking at me going, don't kill me. It's just like, yeah. So I just gave me this confidence to walk away from where I was in my life at the time and where I wasn't being taken seriously. And that's fine. You know, it happens in life. I don't have any hang-ups about that. I think sometimes it's, most of the time, it's up to you to recognize the situation, see that it's not working, and don't start blaming other people around you. Go, actually, no, fucking make a decision. And
it is what it is.
You know, it is what it is. So you can sit here, no problem at all, and you can be super sub, or you can go, fuck that. Yeah, I'm going to try. No, so anyway, I got this amazing opportunity, and I was lucky. But sometimes you create your own luck. There was a lot of work that went on behind the scenes. Eventually, they gave me a slot. I said, I'm going to do it for free. I don't want any money. I want to prove myself. I want to prove myself because at the time, Today FM was quite
ballsy as well, considering the hours, like 12 to 2. Like,
yeah, and Ava was only a couple of weeks old. And what happened was, I won't bore you with details, but like Today FM at the time was very rock driven, very guitar music driven, you know, or pop music and all that kind of stuff. So there was no dance music on their system. Like we'd have a library of records and tunes that, you know, mainstream shows can play. But there was no dance music. There may have been Rhythm as a Dancer by Snap or something that they would play at lunchtime.
Yeah.
So what I used to do was I used to come in, say the show started at midnight, I'd come in at sort of 9 o'clock, and I'd put all my records onto a computer system, and I built a library. So there's thousands of songs there now, and they're all from my CDs and from my records. But I used to do that. I used to program the show, again, because I had no music library to pick from. I'd bring in my own stuff. I program it from 9 or 10 to midnight, and then I'd jump into the studio and I'd do the show. And I knew there was the passion and there was the hunger and there was the fire in my belly to do it. And Kate was very supportive, so we'd put Ava to bed on a Friday evening, and I go, look, I'll see you at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, and off I went, and I did it. But I just again, because I stopped caring and stopped worrying and stopped getting obsessed with failure.
Very liberating, I'd say, the failing.
It was.
You know what I mean?
It didn't. When you're doing something that you believe in and that is enjoyable, I don't think tiredness comes into factor. I never thought about the fact that I was leaving the studio at 2 o'clock in the morning. I really didn't.
Yeah.
I got back at 2:30 and I was buzzing. I was so proud of myself that I had done this. And even if it had failed, you know, at least I did it and I was enjoying myself. It was 2 hours of just playing tracks. And from midnight to 2 o'clock in the morning, it was just bus drivers and people doing overnight shifts and security guards and taxi drivers. But it kind of developed this weird, quite rapid cult kind of following where people were reaching out through social media, going, really liking that, because they were hearing these tracks that Today FM would never have normally played. And that proved popular at that time of night, as mad as that sounds.
Yeah.
And then they reached out and an opportunity came up on a Saturday evening during the kind of the prime time
kind of busy
period.
Hours, yeah.
So it was like 6 to 8, I think, or 6 to 9. And I just took it. And at that point then, you know, they started paying me. But I didn't want a penny until I proved myself.
No, that's,
which is something I've never really spoken about. So when Block Rockin Beats started, I did it for free. And they were very accommodating. Like they were happy to give it a go. And it proved popular. And then it just snowballed. I eventually got an opportunity to do Friday evening at 7 o'clock, which is now one of the main things for Block Rockin Beats, where I was coming on after Matt Cooper, who does this really serious sort of, you know, news and current affairs kind of show. And then at 7 o'clock, suddenly I was on playing The Prodigy and Faithless and all that kind of stuff. But it proved really, really popular. Class. And then I think through lockdown, the audience grew even bigger, and the connection and the bond that I have with the people that tune into the show develops during probably the worst part of my DJing life, because I'd lost everything. I couldn't gig. I was stuck at home for the whole week, and I was in the same situation that a lot of people were in the country. And I think music just brought us together during those days. And
definitely.
we were doing shows in terms of the live show, the gigs that we were doing for Block Rockin Beats. I might get 150 people or 200 people max into a hall, and then suddenly we were doing 500. Then we were doing 1,000 capacities, and then we were doing 2,000 or 3,000, and now we're doing 5,000, 6,000, and
it's amazing. A quick word from our sponsors, The Ink Factory. If you're looking for the best tattoo studio in Ireland, The Ink Factory in Temple Bar is one of the highest rated tattoo studios in the country, with over 5,000 5-star Google reviews. They're home to 30 expert artists, including award-winning talent covering every style from fine line to full custom pieces. They also offer professional piercings from just €25, including jewellery. So whether it's your first tattoo or your next one, you're in safe hands. Visit www.theinkfactory.ie or follow them on Instagram and TikTok at The Ink Factory.
I always wanted, though, to kind of give people a show that when they went along to Block Rockin Beats, that they were blown away by it, and they'd walk away and they'd tell their mates. And give people an escape. An experience. And so far, so good. So
most people know you as the upbeat radio guy, but the last few years have been very heavy. How much has your life changed for you privately?
My life has changed immeasurably. I mean, it's completely changed. The last 3 years have been the hardest 3 years of my life, without doubt. I had a brain hemorrhage out of nowhere in 2023, and then in 2025, summer last year, I was diagnosed with cancer. So those two unbelievable sort of things that have happened in my life have completely changed me. And sometimes, I know this sounds really mad, but sometimes I think for the better. I think I'm a better person.
I think so. Like,
I think when stuff like that happens, it really separates the wood from the trees. It really, it forces you to remove the bullshit from your life, to trim the fat of bullshit basically from your life. It gave me an incredible ability to prioritize things and to say no. And I often say to people that the biggest blessing that two of the worst illnesses ever have come upon my life have given me is the ability to say no and to prioritize my family, and my rest and my time off. And but yeah, I had a brain hemorrhage. What's called a subarachnoid hemorrhage. It happened out of the blue in 2023 when I was out for a run. And
mid-run?
I was out for, I love running. I love going out for a jog because I think it's amazing for your head. I think, exercise, if you're having a tough day or whatever, or you're feeling a bit muggy or your brain is a bit foggy or whatever, going out for a bit of exercise can just reinvigorate your... I used to have... My day is quite formulaic because of what I do. My work is pocketed into tours in the summer or weekend radio shows. I do a lot of the dad stuff, so I'll do a lot of drop-offs at the school, the lunches, the pickups, the training sessions, because Kate's a teacher. She's a youth reach teacher in Pleasant Street. So she's stuck to certain hours. So I used to do the school run and I'd come back, I get a bit of work done, have a coffee or whatever, and I go off for a run. On this one particular day, I went out for a run. We're from Ringsend, and I was going. I used to never. Since the hemorrhage happened, I do bring my phone, but I used to leave my phone at home. I didn't even listen to music. I used to just go off for a run.
Really?
Yeah, I used to go off for a run. I used to love listening to the sound of the world and the peace and that kind of stuff. And I was coming back on this particular day, thankfully, close enough to my house. I was coming up towards Bath Avenue, the bridge there where the Aviva Stadium is. And I remember coming over the bridge and it was like a bomb went off in my head. It was like an explosion happened. And it was such a strange feeling. I remember saying to people afterwards that I actually thought that like an explosion had happened, and that everyone around me could experience or feel what I was feeling. It's a very strange, it's a tricky one to even explain. But it was like a bomb went off in my head, and it was just an excruciating headache that just sort of engulfed my whole head. But I think because I was running, and I was coming towards the end of my 5 kilometer run or whatever it was at the time, that the endorphins were going in my body, and I actually managed to keep jogging, and I made it back to the house. And it was only when I got to the hall door of the house that I realised that this wasn't normal and it wasn't just a headache. And I got into the house, and I remember collapsing on the bed, and there's a sliding doors moment in the whole story, and probably in my life, where I wanted to just pass out. I wanted to just close my eyes. The pain was so unbearable that I wanted to just close my eyes and just to, I don't know what would have happened if I did that. And it's still, as you can see, it haunts me. But something happened. I got this strength from somewhere that I can't explain, and it was like coming back from the dead. It was like coming out of a coffin. I often describe to people as like I was lying back in the bed, and I just forced myself up against the will of my body. I did not want to do that. I just wanted to just fall asleep and pass out because the pain was so bad. And I managed to get my phone, and I sent a WhatsApp message, a voice note to my sister and to my wife. My sister lives close to me, and I knew my wife might see it as well. I knew there was a chance that both of them, or at least one of them, would see it. And I said to myself, something's not right. I'm not well. Something's happened. Don't explain it over a thing. But I said, if you get this message, come back. Please. And do whatever you can to get into the house. I knew they both had keys. So anyway, they managed to come over. They managed to observe me. Before I knew it, I ended up in an ambulance. And then I was in the critical care unit of Beaumont Hospital, where I remained for about a week and a half, where they observed me. But I had a bleed at the back of the brain. It's called a subarachnoid hemorrhage. It's it's that area between the skull and the brain itself, that sort of area in between, where the blood had come out. Mine was a non-aneurysmal subarachnoid hemorrhage, which I know some people will relate to. So for me, it was, they couldn't find a ruptured, blood vessel or whatever. It was a freak sort of spurt of blood that had been shot out into that area. It could reoccur quite quickly, so they had to monitor me. But I knew after the first day or two that the process of healing was going to be self-healing, and it was going to take place over a couple of months and years, and nearly to this day as well. I have side effects from it, but I got incredibly lucky, and it was only because of that moment where I actioned it, and my sister and my wife, when they came back to the house and they saw me. What happens with a brain trauma is, I think it's important to talk about this, because if it happens, people, you might remember. I remember that fucking DJ talking about that. And it might trigger a memory with someone and go, But with a head trauma, something I didn't know was you basically just start vomiting, and it's uncontrollable, like Family Guy kind of stuff, where you just can't stop vomiting because of, I think it's the nausea that the blood, if you can imagine the blood that's kind of in that pocket, sort of swooshing off all the nerve endings and all that kind of stuff. So it's just this overwhelming, nauseous feeling and uncontrollable pain. So when the vomiting started and it wouldn't stop, we ended up, I knew it wasn't, a migraine or whatever. So I ended up in the critical care ward, and they monitored me, and they gave me drugs to try and stop the bleed happening again. And they observed me for several days afterwards, but the pain was like nothing you could imagine. And when I eventually got out of hospital, I had to kind of learn how to walk again. I couldn't. It had pushed all the sort of fluid down my spine, and all my sciatic nerves were were at end, so I couldn't sit down, I couldn't go to the toilet, I couldn't wash myself, I could barely lie in the bed, I couldn't get up and down the stairs. So yeah, I had to learn how to.
Was there was no operation involved, was there?
Thankfully, with a subarachnoid hemorrhage, you can have a situation whereby they have to go in and they have to do a coil to basically stop the blood, to stitch it all back together nearly. You don't like it, for want of a better word. But with me, they couldn't find that spot. So it happens. It's again non-aneurysmal. So they didn't have to, thankfully, kind of open up or get in, to the brain and do an operation. They were certain that this was going to be a healing process that was going to kind of go on over the next couple of weeks and months. But it left me with a lot of side effects. There was huge fatigue. There was a lot of sensory overload issues.
You were talking about brain fog before.
Absolutely, sensory overload issues, fatigue, lack of coordination, lack of balance. There was days where I'd get up again when the pain continued for weeks afterwards, and I managed it with pretty strong painkillers. And then when I eventually was able to kind of start walking again and dressing myself and things like that, I was left.
Was that a bit of a process from when you were in the hospital to when you could do all them things?
It was. It was a long period of time where I was bedridden. Basically, they wouldn't let me out of the bed when I was in hospital, and then when I was eventually discharged, I couldn't. When Kate picked me up, I could hardly walk back to the car. So but I was told and I was reassured, and it turned out to be true. Again, I didn't believe it on certain days, but that this will pass. Right. You will heal, and you will get your mobility, your confidence, and your wits back about you. So
it's a very demeaning process, though, isn't it?
It was a really hard process, and it was, and that's why when I saw what happened with you, I was like, there was flashbacks. So like this sitting opposite you today and having these chats was the dream back when I saw what happened with you. But it was hugely frustrating because I am quite a stubborn bloke. I love life.
Yeah.
I love exercise. I love what I do, and I love my family. And I was in a situation whereby I was in bed and I couldn't move, and I was told I shouldn't move, and if I did stand up, I'd lose my balance and all that sort of stuff. So I had to be patient with myself, and the girls, my family, my parents, and all that kind of stuff were incredible. They kept an eye on me, and the weeks became months, and eventually I got my confidence back and I was able to walk. But it's left me with a lot of side effects that still present themselves from time to time. Even after gigs, I find I have to kind of rest and step aside because I get the sensory overload issues or the dizzy spells or the lack of coordination where, some days you're struggling to kind of put one foot in front of the other. And then it eventually sort of, if you persist with it, you get more fluid. Or if I go for a jog, I remember even in the early stages, if I went for a kind of, I'm talking about after a couple of months, if I went for a walk or a jog, I'd get my coordination back, and I was kind of learning how to be myself again. So I did things even with work when I was going back, where if the radio show was 3 hours, I'd record 2 hours and I'd do an hour live just to slowly get myself back in to the groove of things. So that was 2023, I thought that was it. So I was like, surely life's not going to deal you with another card. And then, August 2025, I got a call to tell me that I was diagnosed. I was diagnosed with cancer. Yeah. So,
was that through tests or whatever you had got previously, and then they gave you a call, or what?
Yeah, I think it was around about the time that we met, which was June 2025.
Yeah.
I was getting my confidence back, and it was probably the first time I remember saying to Kate when I was going on stage, I was like, I feel like myself again. I was looking in the mirror and I was seeing a healthy guy.
Yeah.
I was confident. I wasn't worried about the fatigue and the sensory overload. So it was weird timing, because I remember that was like peak. I was so
because the night I seen you,
I was in the best form ever.
Yeah.
But what had happened was, and one of the reasons why I wanted to speak about it was because it turned out to be breast cancer, which is extremely rare in men. I think breast cancer in men is 1% of the total number of cases every year. That's how rare it is. But
Because before I spoke to you that time,
yeah,
I actually didn't know that men could get breast cancer.
exactly.
Actually,
And I kind of only half knew, because I actually had a lump around about 2017, around about the time actually Block Rockin Beats started, and it was a lump that was on my breast, and I remember going, "That's weird. That doesn't feel right." And I got it checked out with my GP, and he said, just get it out. So I got it out. It was a small operation. They just cut and they just remove it, and it gets sent off for tests, and it came back to be benign. It came back to be harmless. So, the GP at the time said to me, man could get breast cancer. And I was like, really? Yeah. There's no chance of me getting breast cancer, lads. Do you know what I mean? There's like, So, so it was, I think it was around about November or December 2024 when I first discovered another lump. I was in New York and I was out with Kate. I went for a jog and I came back and I remember it was like it wasn't sore. It was just an irritating lump that was just under the breast tissue, close to the nipple. And I was in the shower and I was like, fuck, that bloody lump is back again.
Back again, yeah.
So I went out to Kate and I said to her, remember that lump that I had in 2017? I said, it's back again. She goes, don't worry about it. Just go back and get it taken out. So we came back to Ireland. Christmas came and went. Valentine's Day, Paddy's Day came and went. And I knew I was coming close towards the tour period of time. I said, I better get that lump out just before the tour. So it had been sitting there for a while. Some days I forget it was there. Other days, this is when it kind of became a thing where I said, okay, I need to get this out, because there was sometimes where maybe I was playing football, or if I was with my mates and one of them fist bumped me, on the chest, or if I was playing football and I took the ball down, it would hit it, and I go, God, that's a bit sore. It wasn't sore 9 times out of 10, but sometimes, and then if it got sort of tender, I kind of felt like it stayed tender for a while, and then I knew the tour was coming up for the summer, so just before I met you in June, and I made an appointment to get it out. So I had to organise it to work between shows. So I finished the gig that we did in Galway and I had a month off. I knew there was going to be a small scar that had to heal. So I got the lump taken out, went about my merry way, completely forgot that I even have it, because, men can't get breast cancer.
Yeah.
So I did the last show in Limerick and we had planned to go on a little holiday after that, because I'd been working all summer. So the week after I went away, and it's been about a month since I'd gotten the lump removed, and I had actually completely forgotten that I'd gotten it taken out. And on the first day of our holiday, we were in Spain. We just had our breakfast. Kate went up to the room to get ready. I brought Ava to the pool and I was there sitting with her, and I got a missed call, and I checked the number and I was like, that's your one that removed the lump. Why is she phoning me, Normally you get an email or a text going, everything's fine, get on with your life. I was like, fuck. So I phoned her back and she was like, where are you? I said, I'm in Spain. Why? And she goes, look, we got the results back and I'm sorry to tell you that it was cancer. And then I remember just everything just freezing, time just froze. Ava was in the pool, but suddenly I couldn't hear anything apart from Ava's voice trying to get my attention. And the lady that had removed it over the phone told me pretty quickly that this looks like it's breast cancer, but it could be 2 other types of cancer as well. So we need to get you back. This may have spread into your lymph nodes. And if that's the case, then once it gets into the lymph nodes, it can spread elsewhere. So you straight away start going, this could be a full breast removal. You could be looking at chemotherapy, radiation.
Fuck, I'd say you're overwhelmed with that information.
And I was like, I was sitting in paradise. It was the most unusual place to get told some news like that. And Ava was in the pool. So I remember again, everything just froze. All the noise that was around me just went into the background. All I could hear was Ava trying to get my attention. But at that stage, I'd been given this news. It was the first day of our holiday in Spain, and at this point, Kate didn't know. She knew that there was a missed call because I had texted her, so she says, "Just phone him back." So I had to break the news to Kate, and she was up. We were surrounded by people at the pool, so there was a lot of people around. So I think because I know Kate so well and I know how her mind operates, I knew she would appreciate a heads up before she arrived down to the pool to be told that I was diagnosed with cancer. So again, I think this is because of how well I know her. We had been texting. I sent her a text, and I just said, "It's cancer," and she goes, "Fuck." So she came down, and we spoke about it for a bit. I knew would have time to process it.
Yeah,
before she came down. Because if I told her in person when Ava was there and there was people around us, you know, it wouldn't have been good for anyone involved. You know what I mean? So we made a decision. She spoke to the people that had removed it, and I spoke to my GP, and we decided somehow that we were going to get on with our holiday. And in a weird way, I kind of put it to the back of my mind as much as I could for the holiday, and we got on with it, and we had a good time. It would play in my mind at night time when everything was quiet and I had too much time about what had happened. But we got back. I eventually went in and I saw my GP, and then before I knew it, I was with a specialist in the Mater Private, a fellow called Mitchell Barry, who's just he saved my life.
Yeah, brilliant.
So we had to go in because the lump was removed, and the mindset when it was being removed was that it was harmless. He said, "Look, they may have left some of that sort of tumor or cancerous lump still there, so we have to go in again and remove the rest of the tumor." And then he says, "What we're going to do is we're going to try and preserve the breast, preserve the nipple, and to try and find a clear margin." So they remove the tissue, a section of tissue that's around that lump. So they did that, and they removed some lymph nodes under my arm as well. And thankfully what came back was that it hadn't spread into my lymph nodes. And that was what I wanted to achieve from day one. I was like, if I can contain this with my limited knowledge, if it hasn't spread. So he said, we've gotten rid of the rest of the lump, but he said the rest of the tissue that we've taken, I couldn't find a clear margin. So the rest of your breast is basically riddled with precancer cells. So this is going to come back. So they had to do a mastectomy, which is anyone that has had breast cancer will know that it's a full breast removal. So the whole breast is gone, including the nipple, and you're left with just a scar. But the good news, if there is good news, that once it is gone and once the breast is gone and it hasn't spread into the lymph nodes, they're extremely confident that they've contained it within that, and that when they remove the full breast, that it is gone. But there is no doubt that once again, early detection and early diagnosis and acting upon this weird sort of voice in the back of my head that was going, this might not be good. I'm forcing myself in to see my GP, forcing myself in to get it removed.
Why do you think that men are so bad about being checked?
I think men are guilty sometimes in general, no matter what it is that's wrong with us. We're like, we'll be grand, we'll be fine. But when it comes to especially something like breast cancer, like I knew I wanted to eventually talk about it because I couldn't believe the lack of awareness of breast cancer in men. Because, and understandably so to a degree, it's nobody's fault.
Yeah.
It's just that it's so bloody rare. So, I think it was so important for me to talk about it because I couldn't believe the amount of the lack of awareness of it. But I think men sometimes are guilty of just sort of going, I'll be fine. This is nothing. But as it actually turns out, me actioning that, and he said I was the youngest male. I'm 47. I've no problem talking about my age. I was the youngest male that he had ever diagnosed, but it was the earliest detection in a man, because he said most men, they feel a lump, they forget about it, they don't care about it, they think it's harmless, and then they present themselves in his office after 2 years and going, well, when did you first notice it? 2 years ago. Like,
Yeah, what are you doing?
And that gives this piece of nastiness an opportunity to grow and to spread. So he couldn't believe that I had only, for me, he goes, when did you first notice this? It was like about 6 months ago, to be honest with you. So as it turned out, it was quite an aggressive one. And if I had left it too much longer, there was a strong chance that it would have grown quite rapidly and would have spread. But all I wanted to achieve with my limited knowledge of cancer and breast cancer was that if it hadn't spread into my lymph nodes, that was my big worry. And I remember when the thing that no one really talks about with cancer is how long everything goes on for. With the brain hemorrhage, I felt like I had the brain hemorrhage, I knew I was fucked, and I knew quite quickly the road to recovery or the stuff that needed to happen for me to get back, to get my life back on track. But with cancer, there's an enormous amount of waiting around. There's there's waiting for it, and those periods and those quiet moments at nighttime are the moments that feel like they're endless. And I was imagining things like because when I was getting the lymph nodes removed on my arms, I started feeling lumps under my arms. I started feeling these things that were like, it was nearly like my brain was playing tricks on me. And that was probably getting the breast removed, and the operations were nearly like I know it sounds ridiculous, but they're like, oh my God, I've arrived at this day at last, thank God, and just take the breast off, get rid of it. That was the thing from day one. But it was the weeks and the months waiting around for results to come back were the hardest, and that was the most stressful part. And I wasn't sleeping. I'm quite vocal about that. I wasn't sleeping. I was incredibly stressed. No one, and because I'm in the public eye, I kind of had to kind of keep the show on the road, because I didn't know, at this point, I didn't know what my end destination was going to be. So I kind of had to keep the show going for my own mental health, for my family, for Ava, that everything was still going to be normal. I was my stress had reached a point where my hair was falling out with just pure stress. Thankfully, that's reversed itself a little bit. You know what I mean?
It looks like that now.
But yeah, it was an extraordinary journey, and it was something that I knew that I wanted to talk about because of the lack of awareness and the lack of understanding of breast cancer.
Yeah, because when I was saying that, I think it was like, when you announced that, I was like, very soon after you announced it, going like, I didn't actually even realise that men could get breast cancer.
And I knew it was going to cause a reaction, because I knew even when I was diagnosed and your one said to me, this is cancer and it looks like it's breast cancer, and we were in Spain, I'm going, like, nobody's going to believe this. I mean, I've just literally gotten over a brain hemorrhage. I'm the healthiest motherfucker that ever lived. I look after myself so well. I hardly drink. I don't smoke. I never did drugs, even during the 90s, the peak of the rave scene, when it was all around me. I go for my exercise. I played sport I played a lot of rugby when I was younger. I eat well. I take my vitamins and all that stuff. And I'd had a brain hemorrhage, and then I knew I was going to go. I'm going to eventually have to go. I've been diagnosed with breast cancer. I remember sitting down with Kate that night when we were in Spain, and I was like, put in there to chat, whatever it's called, ChatGPT or what it's called. The chances of a 47-year-old male having a brain hemorrhage and breast cancer within the space of 2 years. And it was something like 10 million to 1 type thing, So it's an incredibly strange story. It's been an incredibly strange couple of years, but here we are. And again, back to that chat that we had, it really puts things into context and makes you realize what's important. at no point during the journey did I think, and I know this sounds mad, and maybe only a certain amount of people, including yourself, can understand this, but at no point during the journey did I ever think it was going to break me or that it was going to beat me. I knew when I was lying in hospital and I was unable to move with the brain hemorrhage, I knew I was going to be back up. And
I think that I would say, like, from my experience, that's probably why I'm sitting here today. That's what I do say to people, you know, that's...
I would 100% agree with that. And I remember saying to the specialist on the first day I went into him, and he's an absolute gentleman. I love him to bits. And the breast care nurses, they're like angels. They've just been they've been there for me since, and they're there for me all the time. And they were at the Block Rockin Beats gig at the Olympia Theatre. But I remember sitting down with him on the first day when I'm back, and I was like, look, we're going to talk here. Stuff is going to happen. We're probably going to, and this is even before he had even sort of properly diagnosed the whole thing. I was like, probably going to have a breast removal. I said, just take it all off.
Yeah, just go.
I said, but the one thing that's not going to happen here is that this is not going to kill me.
Brilliant. Yeah.
This is going to, I'm going to get through this. And I knew he was looking at me with his vast amount of experience going, that lad's talking shite, because you don't. but I was determined to keep the show on the road. I was determined to keep everything going for my family. And that is...
And that's the one thing that I wanted to ask you. What has the illness taught you about being like a family man and a father?
I just, to be honest with you, it's actually shown me how resilient an 8 or 9 year old kid can be. How much they're aware of stuff, but how strong kids are. They're like, Ava was shocking me with how, because she's had to deal with that. I mean,
of course.
We're so close. And I remember one particular day when I was in hospital, I was in Beaumont, and it was the early stage. I think it was my second day there, and Ava tried to come in and she couldn't come in. And I remember having a FaceTime with her, and I had tubes attached to me and an oxygen mask on me, and she was there looking at it. I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
You know? And then she dealt with it. She processed it. She did it in her own. I had to be honest with her because it was so obvious what had happened. And then I knew it was going to happen again with the breast cancer. I knew when I got the full breast removed, because again, we're so close, that there was no way to hide it. And I didn't want to hide it from her either. I didn't want to give her the full sort of big, scary talk. I didn't think that was necessary, you know, going into detail about cancer and all that. But I knew when I had the mastectomy, she sees me in the morning when I get up, and I've got my boxer shorts on and I'm making her breakfast. So she sees me with my top off.
Yeah.
And I knew that the breast cancer scar is quite extreme. It's a linear scar that goes across your chest. And I knew there was no way that so I had to talk to her about it. And I had to be honest with her to agree. And I said that, you know, it was a bad lump. Because I knew, again, because of what I do, that this eventually, if I ever spoke about it, or if anyone got word of it, that it was going to be out there eventually. And what I didn't want to happen was I wanted to control the story around it, because my biggest nightmare would have been to not talk about it, for someone to find out about it, for it to end up in a newspaper or online.
Especially being in the public eye yourself,
exactly.
you know?
And then suddenly someone in Ava's class or a parent accidentally says it to a kid, and then they go into the school and they're like, your dad has cancer. Yeah. So I wanted to control it. So I was very honest with her, and myself and Kate sat down with her, and we didn't go into too much detail, but I said, look, there's a bad lump here that has to go. I said, once it's gone, I'm going to be okay. But I said, you're going to see a scar. And she's like, that's cool. So we have the crack with it. You know,
she's a cool little kid.
She's a brilliant kid.
She is,
you know,
she's a cool kid.
And she's insanely smart, and she's got a great sense of humor, you know, and she kind of, we joke, she's like, oh, Dad, I've got 2 boobs, and you've only got 1. So there's all that sort of stuff. But you know, if there's one message that I could get across is if you spot something, or if there's a lump or something that doesn't feel right, and for me it was a lump, it just didn't feel right. It wasn't sore. It was noticeable enough. It was like kind of the size of a small pebble. Get it checked, because you're wasting nobody's time. No doctor or no specialist is going to go, for fuck's sake, you're just wasting my time there. If it comes back and it's harmless, happy days, you've gotten rid of it. But for me, if I hadn't listened to that little bloody voice, overactive mind of mine going, this is not right, get in there and get it taken out, I don't know I wouldn't be here today. So
Were you
it saved
ever
my life.
fearful around that time because of Ava and Kate and stuff like that?
Absolutely.
Obviously, if things went wrong, that there was gonna be a chance that you were gonna lose them.
That's it.
essentially.
That was always on. From the moment I got the call, obviously your mind goes into, especially at nighttime, your mind goes into the darkest,
Yeah,
most lonely place.
catastrophic.
And those nights can just feel like months. But all I wanted to do from the very first day of the hemorrhage and from the very first day of being diagnosed with breast cancer was to protect the girls and to shield them from the worry. And that's sometimes achievable, sometimes it's not. But you do your best. But yeah, for me, I think for most people, it's about protecting the innocent minds. But once again, not that I needed it, but it made me prioritize things and to realize what's important in life. And here I am today.
Yeah, 'cause that was actually the last question I had for you. What would you say is the biggest difference in the way you look at life now in comparison to before you got sick?
Yeah, I think it gives your twice over the last 3 years, I had my own mortality sort of slammed in my face. I couldn't avoid it. It was there. And, if there's always the what ifs and that kind of stuff. If I hadn't actioned things, if I had fallen asleep that day on the bed when I had the hemorrhage, what if? And then there's also the questions, there's also the whys. And sometimes the whys can bring, obviously you're questioning yourself, but there's days where you can feel angry about it. You get into a kind of a headspace where you go, why me? Why me? What did I do to deserve this?
Especially getting sick once and then getting sick in a relatively close space of time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's made me realize what's important in life. It's made me. I think I'm actually a sounder person. I think I'm actually a nicer person than I was. I always thought I was quite nice.
I knew you a long time ago. You've always been sound, yeah.
So I think maybe to my wife, maybe my wife thinks I'm sounder now.
Yeah.
But I've definitely and learning. It throws life directly in your face. It makes you realize that the days when you just wake up and your biggest worry is a bad pint or a dodgy coffee or you've got a cold or something like that. They're great days.
Yeah,
they are brilliant days because there's days when, God forbid the hammer swings and something happens and for me it was the brain hemorrhage and it was cancer and all I wanted in those times was those days when everything was boring and normal. So it gives you a heightened sense of what's important in life.
I think after going through something, you'd pray for a day where like there was something like a bad point or a bad coffee that'd set you off because it's like, what even is that after going through something?
Yeah, and it made me prioritize things, and it gave me this amazing ability to say no. I think because of the nature of my personality and the nature of my job, there was a sense that, you've got to show up for this, you've got to take that gig, you've got to show up to this, the opening of an envelope for this party because you might meet someone else, and there was you feel like you have to say yes, you have to people please, and even when it comes to something as simple as my mate's looking to meet me for a pint, if I feel, and I would have forced myself to do something or gone to a family party or gone to a work event, if I don't feel right and it doesn't feel right, I say no. Or if there's a gig I don't want to do, I say no. Or even with an interview, I've only really spoken about this to people that I love and that I care about because that's where I'm comfortable talking, and there was a time maybe when I would have accepted all various different interviews, but for me it was important to talk to people like yourself because I'm totally relaxed and it feels good. So I think I'm a sounder person. I think I've learned what's important in life, and I've started now with the gigs even more so to stop, to look around, to see the people in the crowd, to hear the music, to see my daughter, see my wife, and make more time for them.
Yeah, just live in the moment more.
And just live in the moment, and try and enjoy life as best you can. But yeah, so every day now that I wake up, and I'm still going through it. I've got a long-term treatment plan for the next 5 years. But that's okay. You know, that was my dream situation when I was diagnosed with cancer. So I've been lucky.
Yeah, brilliant, bro. Thanks so much for sharing your time with me.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for taking the time out to talk to me. I mean, to sit opposite you, and this moment for me, when myself and Kate saw the first update about what had happened with you, I remember all I wanted to do in that moment was actually give you a part of my body, because I knew how your mind works. I know how lovely and beautiful and caring you are. And
I appreciate that.
when I was sitting there looking at you, this moment and this chat, that's why it was so important to come and have a chat.
Yeah.
This was my dream, to sit opposite you and
No,
to see how healthy you're doing. So thanks for taking the time to chat to me, man. It means more than you probably ever will know.
No, I appreciate it, and it's good for everybody to raise awareness around the situation, we'll say.
That's the only reason I wanted to talk about it, because I wanted to raise awareness, and somebody, even if it's one person, and I get it on social media, I've been flooded with messages, and I've had people reaching out, and I've had very few men. There's 2 men I can think of that have come to me saying that one had been recently diagnosed and one had gone through treatment. But I actually had a couple of women that had reached out to me. Well, a lot of women that reached out to me had breast cancer and had shared the most incredible personal and detailed stories about their journey, which is such an honor and such a privilege to be the recipient of those personal stories. But there was 1 or 2 women who had reached out, and they had said that, you know, my dad had breast cancer, and maybe their dad was from an older generation, and he was embarrassed to talk about it because men don't get breast cancer.
Yeah.
For me, if this story reaches one person and makes a difference, and then it's worthwhile for me to do it and to do these interviews and to have these chats, because they're not hard. They're not easy chats to have.
Yeah.
And again, I think because of everything that's happened to me, sometimes after these interviews, I can feel quite fatigued or quite tired. But if one person listening acts upon something doesn't feel right, like a lump, then that is job done, and it makes me the happiest man in the world.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for your time, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. See you again next week.